Hello, everyone. My name is Kristin Snowden, and this is a free webinar that is brought on through sexandrelationshiphealing.com, where I try to cover all things related to relationships, but mainly I try to focus in on how to best navigate relationship crises, because a lot of you are here because you've uncovered unknown addictions, infidelity, maybe just live in a place and space where you constantly feel confused or hurt in your relationship. Maybe there's some emotional abuse, etc. So today I'm going to be focusing on three steps that I've found can be very helpful in helping you sort through the messy, huge emotions that exist when you're in a relationship crisis. They can feel all consuming. And these three steps will hopefully help you regain a sense of control of your life and your body, and move towards a more productive solution, or at least, at the very least, more stability in your life. Because, like I said, many of you are suffering and struggling with an environment where you feel like there's a lot of emotional abuse or hurt or mean things being said. There might be a lot of gaslighting or manipulation, lies, etc. And so this obviously stirs up a lot of big emotions in your body where you feel unsafe, etc. It can cause you to maybe lash out or do behaviors or responses that are just not you when you feel safe. You don't say these things, you don't do these things when you feel safe and in control. So these three steps will help those people who are struggling. Conversely, on the other side, if you are the addict or betrayer or struggling in those kind of ways, this is also helpful to you because most addicts and betrayers struggle with connecting with their emotions. They, compartmentalize things. They push their emotions down and instead they pursue intensity, distraction, numbing, etc. So these three steps will hopefully help you bring these emotions back to the surface again so you can start sorting out better ways to manage them, better coping skills to deal with them. Um, so processing these emotions are at the core of your recovery journey. We all say you have to do X, Y, and Z to get through this crisis, but one of the big pieces is the feelings and emotions we have going on in our body. We all need to become more emotionally intelligent and feel like we have some agency again, because these emotions can feel like they've taken over our life, like they've paralyzed us, like they have just kind of, an alien has come into our body and possessed us and caused us to do things that are outside of who we are. And then right behind that comes a lot of shame and like, I'm bad and I'm wrong, etc. But before I dive into that, I want to caveat, whenever we talk about emotions, I want to validate that having these big emotions in the crisis, that's not the problem. You have every right to feel anger and rage, and it is common. It is the most common response to do things out of character, throw things, say mean things. So never hear during this discussion about emotions that I'm saying you're bad or wrong, or your emotions are why your partner has acted out, or you better, get these in check or else. That is not what I'm saying. I'm validating that in a moment of crisis, it is normal and common for the emotions to get the best of us. And the best that we can do is just kind of really strengthen that muscle to get through these crises and move towards stability and a higher level. We have to put a lot more thought and oxygen and planning and training into how to deal with these emotions because they just get so big for us. So please don't hear, that your emotions are any of the things that have caused these problems. You're just, now that we're in crisis, we're working to kind of develop that muscle and get through that. And the other reason too is a lot of us were not raised in an emotionally intelligent house. We weren't given the initial tools to to really process and filter through what our emotions are and how to deal with them. The example I give for that is, hey, what language do you speak? Most likely, the language that you speak, English, if you're listening to an English video, is because the people around you spoke English. Did they sit down and teach you how to speak English? Like, oh, this is the word, this is that, this is how you say this. Most of it was learned through just absorbing it in your environment, hearing it, adapting. And our emotions are the same thing. We learn what emotion is okay in your life based on watching your parents, watching the people around you, watching people on TV, and then gender roles play a role in this. What kind of emotions are men allowed to access, and how are they supposed to show those emotions? What kind of emotions are women allowed to access? And, what's too much emotion? What's too little emotion? How am I supposed to respond? So when we're talking about these 3 steps to sort through messy, big emotions, I want you to also be mindful of what you've been told your expectations should be and would be around these emotions. I should be responding this way. A reasonable person would respond this way. And really just pay attention. We'll talk a little bit more about those in the shame category, or when we talk about the shame stuff. So I've broken them down to 3 C's because when we're in crisis, we're in trauma, and we lose connection with our sense of choice and context and connection with ourselves and others. So when we're sorting through these 3 things, these 3 parts of your emotions, I'm bringing back the 3 C's. I want you to first understand the content of the emotional experience. What is the current presenting problem, triggering event that has caused you to have uncomfortable physical sensations? What is the surface issue going on? Was it a conversation? Someone said something, you found something on the phone, you heard a song on the radio, you see something, you're driving down a street, an anniversary of something really upsetting is coming up for you. This is the content, the surface, present moment, triggering event. And we're going to talk a little bit how to process that. The second layer that you need to peel is the context of the emotional experience. The bigger picture, and what I like to say is the underlying historical context of your emotional experience. So this is usually your trauma response and your shame stories, because those are 2 survival systems that are always on and always kind of quietly whispering stories and history. We want them because they're, again, part of our survival system. They help us survive, but they're not always accurate. And we need to use higher level functioning, higher level thinking to really sort through what is a real threat. And are these trauma responses and shame stories accurate? I'll detail those as we get down into that category. And then the third step is returning choice to the emotional experience. Once you've processed the surface issue, the content, and you've fully explored the contextual emotional experience, I want you to bring back choice to the situation. What do I want to do about this information? What can I actually do about this emotional experience? What I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, what's happening? What are my coping skills? What questions do I want to ask? Can I reality check what's accurate, what's not accurate? Do I need to talk this out with someone, pray on it, take a walk, do some down regulation skills? But these are all choices, because I'm going to remind you, if you don't do these steps, the emotions will control you. You will not feel like you're in control of the emotions. And as Brene Brown says, if you don't write this story, understanding the content, context, choice, the emotions and all the trauma and the shame will write the story for you. and it will take you for a roller coaster ride that feels scary, out of control, like you're not yourself, like you have no way to assert agency in this situation, like there's a powerlessness, etc. So taking the time to master this three-step process can help you really differentiate and separate out fact from fiction, trauma, shame, what are my options, how can I assert choices, rather than acting out, projecting, numbing, distracting, blaming, etc. It also will allow you in this process to practice empathy, self-compassion with yourself, feel like you can respond in a more congruent, productive way with yourself or with others. And the important thing too is when you fully process and understand what you want to take from what happened, the emotions, you can more productively adapt and change your behaviors and kind of learn and grow from it. And very importantly, because so much of life is about relating and engaging others, is you want to be able to express the emotions, what's going on for you, express your experience with others, and see if you can alone come up with a solution, or if you can use the help of another to move towards solution and clarify what more information you need. Plus, it also helps you understand, do I need to make some kind of repair? Did I act in a certain way that was incongruent? Do I need to go back and fix something? So let's start with number one. And I like to use an example. So the example I came up with while I was running around this morning like a crazy person, because that's what my mornings look like, is I will use the context and content of preparing for this webinar, because there's lots of feelings that I experience when I look at that's the second Wednesday of the month. I know I have to do a live webinar, and I have lots of feelings that come through. And if I don't properly sort through them, you bet your bottom dollar that it comes out in me being short with my kids, stomach aches, unable to pay attention to anything else. Lots of really negative, critical comments about myself and my life choices and everything. It gets ugly fast. So let's talk about this. Let's start with the content, the present, current triggering situation. Let's start with the feelings. So believe it or not, I had to do a lot of feelings 101 when I was growing, when I was emotionally growing, let's say in my late 20s, early 30s. I thought I knew what feelings were, but no, I spent a lot of time here up in my head, telling myself stories, um, thinking I could control things when I couldn't control them. And I didn't really realize that feelings are everything that kind of happens under your chin. We use words like mad, sad, glad, afraid, resentful, angry, happy. But essentially what feelings are, we see things or we remember things like our trauma, and it triggers stuff in our brain, and our brain releases chemicals and hormones into our body, creating sensations. I have videos on our autonomic nervous system and how that works, and that's part of the whole feelings thing. So you can watch that if you want to know more. But a lot of us, because they're uncomfortable, oftentimes we've cut ourselves off from them. We've found ways to just be like, I don't feel that. So sometimes just this number one step takes a lot of time, figuring out what's going on down below here. We need to practice mindfulness, what's going on in my body. So as I felt myself buzzing, because that's what I do, I'm an over functioner when I'm in like messy emotions usually. So I feel this sense of like buzzing and pushing and this kind of exhaustive, like, I have to just keep going through this. I have to get through this. And then I quickly can move to like victimhood, like, oh, poor me. I have so many things that I have to do. But that's my over functioning part. And I have to be mindful of that. So it starts with the feelings. The content is, ooh, I'm feeling something. As Brene Brown would say, I'm hooked by some kind of emotion. What's going on here? It's Wednesday webinar day. That's the content. So I'm asking myself, what has happened or what is happening that's causing me to feel the chest tightness, maybe the stomach discomfort, the buzzing in my head and in my body, like a tingling all over my body. Start with the feeling and start asking questions. What am I afraid of happening? What am I sad about? What am I hurt about? Angry about? Where am I feeling this in the body? What would I call it? Sometimes the emotional experience is so simple that that's the only step that you have to go to. That's what's going on. I have this happening and it's stressing me out. More often than not, that won't get rid of the big nagging sensation, and you need to continue on to steps 2 and 3. But that's the content of the experience, the present, current day experience that's going on. And that is, I have a webinar. I'm very stressed about it. I'm nervous. I'm afraid it's not going to go well. And it causes me to move into like a buzzing, over functioning kind of state. Now I need to move into step 2, the context, the bigger picture, because I'm an adaptive human and I don't experience nervousness or fear or anxiety for no reason. I usually have had some kind of historical, contextual, usually uncomfortable, let's even call it a traumatizing experience that would tell me that this is potentially a bad thing. Approach with caution. This is potentially a bad, threatening experience. Now, the word threatening can be very, very generalized because remember, a trauma response, that's part of this context. The context is exploring the trauma history and a trauma response, and then your shame story around it. A trauma is recorded in your body anytime your nervous system feels overwhelmed, like it's ill-equipped to handle something, like it's experiencing some level of threat to who you are as a person, to something in your life, something that's important to you, your literal life, like a car accident or something really scary happening, but it records it in your body to say, ooh, don't forget, this is potentially bad. And it will come up anytime you just barely touch upon a version of that. So when we move from the content of the problem into the context, ask yourself, where did I learn that this experience is bad? Where might have I seen either myself suffer and struggle because of this experience, or did I watch somebody else suffer and struggle from this experience? What's my history around this? So taking the webinar, we can say, okay, well, there's been times that I've flubbed up public speaking. Public speaking is really scary. It's a very vulnerable act to get up there, say, hey, this is me and my expertise, and am I good enough at it? There's lots of people out there viewing it. Then I post it on YouTube. People are open to leave the comments that they want to make. For the most part, they're positive comments, but I get some zingers in there. That records as a version of trauma, right? Little pieces of evidence that, maybe I'm not good at my job and that my job is threatened or my life is threatened because I might not be good at what I do for a living. The problem with trauma, again, we want it because it's an adaptive skill that takes anything that might have been overwhelming, scary, bad, records in our body, it's seared in our memory, and resurfaces anytime something generally similar shows up. But the problem is that it is general. So our trauma response can cause us to jump to conclusions, fill in blanks with my own wounds and trauma, maybe not necessarily the current facts of the moment, but I fill it in with a bunch of trauma history, and I can make judgments and generalizations that may not be accurate, right? So the problem with the trauma response of me doing this webinar is maybe in the past I might have screwed up. Maybe in the past someone hasn't liked my webinars, but I don't have that current information. Is that all accurate? And then is it an actual threat? And how bad is it? What's really going to happen here? And believe it or not, you have to take the time to sort those questions out because your survival mechanism is powerful and it will just see any threat as the threat and have a really strong response to it. So you have to kind of put it reality check through it. The other thing you need to realize is very quickly you can have the content of a problem, right? I'm having this live webinar, but my trauma response and shame response might be so strong, I'm not even dealing with the content of the problem anymore. This happens a lot in couples issues, and especially if you're in crisis. You're no longer dealing with the fact that you see the blocked phone call or your partner came home later than he or she said he was going to come home, and you're having a really strong response to it. Sometimes we quickly move out of the current present day stressor and concerning thing, and we are all the way into our trauma response. We are operating from a historical experience of something really bad and scary happening. So just pay attention to that. We can slip in a millisecond from a content issue to a contextual issue of, our trauma history. So the second piece of the contextual issue is our shame story. We all have shame. I've had many videos on it, so I'm going to try to touch upon it very quickly, which is shame is part of our survival mechanisms. It's an adaptive learning system that we have, just like our trauma responses, except instead of focusing at the external threat, right? Like for this, it's the webinar and people are going to judge me or something might go wrong out here. The shame is a longer lasting nagging story about how I contribute to the bad things, how my flaws and my shortcomings are what will cause the bad thing to happen. It's tied into our wiring for social connection. So I wouldn't have shame if I didn't care how you perceived me. I wouldn't experience any kind of shame if I didn't want to be good at my job, if I didn't want this to be an effective webinar where you're learning something from it and gaining something from it. So the shame is this social connected piece where it's saying, oh, wow, you want people to like you. You want people to perceive you as competent or a good mom or a good therapist or a good partner. It's going to push back and say, well, what if you're not? I'm going to collect a lot of information that says you kind of suck at it. And then I'm going to follow you around the house and kind of whisper these stories at you about, oh man, you're talking on and on and on again. There you are. You just are not a clear communicator. Or man, you are just super messy. You don't know what you're talking about. You say all the time. These are all the reasons that make you valueless. And the really messed up thing is it thinks it's doing you a favor because it thinks if it keeps telling you all the ways that you are messed up or screwed up or imperfect or all the ways you could do better and be better, that it's going to protect you from bad things happening, right? Because we can't fix what's external to us. I can't fix what's outside me. But my shame voice is like, I can fix you. And I'm going to constantly tell you and point out all the evidence of the ways that you suck and the ways that you need to be better and do better. So it's this quiet voice in your head that I feel like is the more lasting nagging piece that keeps these emotional experiences with you and kind of dragging you down. I've, like I said, a lot of videos on this. It's one of the hardest things that I teach people, but when they start getting it, they really start getting it. It takes an extra piece of digging underneath, and then you need to speak the shame. So ask yourself these questions if you want to know what the shame voices are. How am I afraid of being perceived in this situation? How am I afraid I'm being perceived right here, right now in this emotional experience? What is that dark, quiet story about how I'm broken, how I'm flawed, how I'm causing this problem? How am I feeling less than or even valueless in this particular situation? So let's go to the live webinar. Yes, I'm afraid of flubbing it up. Yes, I'm afraid of, saying the wrong thing, and historically people saying I pronounce words the wrong way, or my makeup's messed up, or something like that. But there's these little quiet voices that are like, you just don't even know what you're talking about. You're an imposter. People don't respect you. They don't like you. You are conceited. You're narcissistic. You're not empathetic enough. You are taking away from your children by putting your thoughts and feelings into your career. You preach empathy, but you suck at it with your family. Those are the things that continue to haunt you even after you realize there's no real threat. I'm going to do this live webinar and I'm going to survive. But the continued buzzing is often those shame voices that just kind of peck at you and peck at you. So really quick, I want to say since the context is a lot, that second step, let me help you understand the difference between trauma response and shame. So if you can, imagine that the trauma response is it's simplistic actually. It's just a little fire alarm that goes off anytime your body feels like you're in any kind of level of danger or threat. And it is just referencing historical information, historical potential threats, overwhelming, scary moments. They're real. You saw something, you felt something, something happened to you, you watched someone else go through something really scary, and it's causing you to feel a trauma response. Shame, on the other hand, is not real. It's based on your trauma history, but instead it's this lasting yucky feeling that goes beyond, oh, you're being threatened, there's something specific that you need to do to protect yourself. No, instead it's this nagging, overgeneralized voice that causes you to perseverate these nasty, critical stories about yourself, about what happened, about what you did wrong, about how you're wrong, in a very open, non-specific way. It's not a fixable way. It's more like you're not good enough. There's nothing you can do to fix it. This is proof of the way that you're not good enough, and just kind of rubs your faith in your imperfections and screw-ups and valuelessness. And it causes you to obsess, to perfect, to perform. Or conversely, if you're not an overfunctioner like I am, it causes you to shut down, become irritable, underperform, not show up, not say anything. So then let's move to step 3. The third step is, now that I've fully processed all these, current present day triggers and feelings and contextual story that kind of paints the rest of the colors on the big portrait, I move to choice. This is where I can move back into my power and not feel like my emotions are dragging me through the morning as I prepare for this webinar. I can bring choice back in. So I need to ask myself, okay, I know what's going on. I know the current situation. I know the contextual background. What do I want to do about this, Kristin? You have choices. And it can be like in this little moment or big picture things. What actually can I do about this? What elements of this situation can I assert agency in? I mean, I only can control myself. So first there's down regulation techniques, right? And I have videos on that, how to down regulate your body, move out of the trauma response, move through shame resiliency, and just calm the neurobiology down, calm the chemistry down, the hormones down, get that nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, to trigger into the parasympathetic state and move back into like my higher functioning brain, where like this remembers who I am, what I want to be, blah, blah, blah. Ask clarifying questions, either to myself or to another person. Was that accurate? Do I need to know more information? She said this, but did she really mean this when she said it? Maybe I need to clarify if she did say that. Reality check. What's true? What's not true? Challenge distortions. Is that accurate? Or did I make that up in your head? Or, wow, that sounds really critical. How accurate is that critical feedback loop system? What parts of it is accurate? It's kind of that guilt versus shame. How can I make better choices versus am I actually really bad? You know, am I making bad choices or am I a bad person? Update the information. This is huge. Your trauma is based on history, but you are all highly adaptive beings that are constantly learning more. I mean, you're here in these webinars for the purpose of learning more and growing. Sometimes you need to just update that trauma part of you, that wounded part of you, that shame story to say, yeah, maybe back in the day, you were operating with less information. You didn't have the same skill set. You didn't know back then. That's why it happened. Now you know. Now you're better at it. Now you have the skills to deal with it. Or sometimes the choice is you literally have to do something. You have to send a text message. You have to ask someone a question. You have to make a phone call. You have to talk it out. You have to set a new boundary to help you feel safe. Okay, this isn't working. I need new boundaries. What needs to happen to bring me back to safety? What kind of clarifying boundary do I need to set for that person so this stops happening? Remind yourself your values and goals. Who am I? What am I doing this for? What is my end goal here or end goals? So for the example of presenting, I process the content, the context, and say, okay, Kristin, what can you actually control about this webinar? Well, you can always prepare. You can sit down, carve out time where you write out an outline. You really sort through in your head what you're trying to say and get across to everybody. And then I need to fact check and reality check and challenge distortions. I can edit out parts that don't work and make the, permanent evergreen stuff online look better, sound better. I can also deal with the fact that, yeah, there are people who are critical, who are going to view me as not good, not helpful, messy, whatever. But there's also people that I can be helpful to, and that's who I need to focus on. I can also update that information. I've been doing live presentation for a long time. I already know I start off scared and nervous and worried something bad's going to happen. And then somehow it kind of all comes together again. I can challenge it and reality check and just say, public speaking's hard. There's only a tiny percentage of people who are ever even willing to do this. And so do I want to instead focus on the fact that I'm doing something scary but rewarding and vulnerable but courageous? Will that help me feel more empowered when I can kind of frame it in that way? So those are the ways of working through those 3 steps. And the bottom line is that when you have fully processed and are aware of the content, context, then that is rumbling inside you, you can bring back choice in the matter, in the situation. Not only that, but once you've done that work internally and with yourself, you can then better create a map to engage others and even maybe ask questions and find out this information from other people when they act a certain way and the content doesn't really make sense. The way they're emoting doesn't match the problem that you're perceiving, what's going on here. So you can kind of say, oh, I bet there's some like trauma history going on or some shame voices that might be feeding into this person's reaction. Let's ask more questions. And a reminder that if you don't understand these 3 pieces, these emotions will instead control you, and they can cause you to show up in a way that you don't want to show up, that in a way that's not productive to you, that's not moving you towards the recovery healing path, that might cause you to relapse, that might cause you to not show up and set those boundaries and do the things that you need to do to keep yourself safe and move towards crisis management and moving towards stability. And again, I'm going to remind you to check out the videos that I have that would accompany this, which is like how to down-regulate your emotions, how to down-regulate trauma responses, work through shame resiliency, and remind you that I have 2 new workshops that are coming up in April. I have my One of my favorite, it's Life Anonymous. It's going to be a 10-week group, which is great. That's a nice long group for everybody to get to know each other and work together. And then a small, short 4-week Betrayed Partners group. And those are all on my website, kristinsnowden.com.
So always great. And when you talked about Brene Brown, if you don't write the story, the emotions will do it in a negative way. And I thought, like even when you were talking about the zingers, and I was like, why is it one zinger zings us, and we get lots of nice, valid, well, heartfelt, positive comments. And that one zinger is the little voice that we're walking around listening to. It's kind of insane, but I was tearing up when you were talking. I was like, oh my gosh, all those things you're talking about, like, A, they're not true about you, and B, but I can completely relate to that, as well, of like that I'm not good enough, and that, what if I screw it up, and what, all of those things. And I'm like, we're doing the best that we can. We show up, we do the best that we can, and that should be enough. But one little zinger about something, and we're like, oh, I love that you were talking about challenge the distortions too, because it is a distorted, and to pull it out and go, is this real? And if there's a legitimate comment that could help, in my betterment, fantastic, but there's a lot of things that are not. And if I can contextualize that's coming from somebody else's woundedness or whatever it is, it's not personal, whatever, but like it takes work to do that. I was thinking with these, I was like, how helpful will it be if I put this on my phone, as a reminder, if I'm starting to feel something. And you're right, it's like I feel it in my chest or in my gut. And so if I just went, oh, like the 3 C's, and just had that little note of like, to remind me, because you know what, it's really hard in that moment when stuff is coming up to go, to stay here and go, what do I need to do, rather than, than the reaction and the shame. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and like, I was like, oh my gosh, this person's shame was like visible, everything that person was saying, just kept going back to the shame. And I was like, that is such a heavy weight. And it was external things, like that this person had no control over any of those things. They were taking on the weight of that, and to be able to shift that and contextualize that of like, nope, that isn't, that frees you up to be able to look at how to move forward in a different way. So, and I honor you. I'm going to just flat out honor you. I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you taking time and creating content that is meaningful, and it matters to me, and I'm grateful. So I'm going to honor that. So, and then we have questions. I'm going to try to read it through teary eyes. My partner is an addict of alcohol, narcotics, and porn. He had a major relapse on substances that spiraled into an affair, first and only to my knowledge, but many years of lying and hiding substance use. D-Day was late November. He started the affair while I was dealing with my sister being in the hospital after having a major seizure and discovering she has terminal brain cancer. I immediately asked him to physically leave the house, and have not been open to him returning. We have teenagers, and me and the kids are really struggling. My partner has 60 days sober and is working hard, but we haven't been able to have a real, true conversation about what's happened, or I haven't been ready to be in the same space. I'm struggling with detachment and shame. How do I heal on my own when my partner doesn't have the capacity to hold space for my pain? He says it's a relapse trigger. How do I stop blaming myself? How do I communicate with him? Lots of questions in there, Kristin. So let's unpack it.
Right. But this is a very typical scenario. And first, I just want to say, I'm sorry, because you're right. You are in the trenches of so much pain from your sister to your husband's betrayal in a time where you were so vulnerable, and you're trying to caretake teenagers. And it's overwhelming. This is exactly what I mean. It's understandable if you struggle with the emotions, because look at all that you're trying to do. But we do tend to have a protocol for this process, because this is the way people come in to see us, and Tammy can also talk about this. But it's this idea that, yeah, your betraying partner is not going to have the capacity to show up for you in the way that his partner needs to. So he usually needs to go off and start getting some sobriety, like actual real sobriety, recovery, going to meetings, getting a sponsor, starting to work the steps, and getting that in check so he can start showing up with more empathy and compassion for what's going on for you. And for you, I always recommend the betrayed partner find a safe space like a betrayed partners group. Sex and relationship healing.com has a ton. I have some. Other places have many for seeking integrity. And you can find a place and space where you can find others who can show empathy and compassion for you, because your addict partner might not be able to be there for you, and you do need to be able to talk about what's going on, cry, grieve, be scared, be angry. And hopefully over time, when he has enough sobriety on his belt and has been working the steps and has gotten stable, and you've been kind of able to do these 3 C's so many times that you understand what's going on, you have a better grasp on the content, the context, your choices and down regulation techniques, that you can do couples therapy, do disclosure, move towards healing, more productive kind of conversations about yourself, him, the repairing process. That tends to generally be the healing process. I don't know. What do you think,
Yeah,
Tammy?
lots. Like 60 days sober is, I mean, like a drop in the bucket. I mean, great for him. He gets the chip, blah, blah, blah. And as a person in recovery, yay. And so like empathy is a higher order skill, and having the capacity to show up, like, he's in kindergarten with that. And like Kristin said,
Right.
like, I'm so glad you're here. And I put the drop-in groups, we have separate ones for betrayed partners, than those struggling with addiction. Tuesday nights is the co-occurring sex or porn and substance. He would be welcome at that one, but any of the drop-in groups, would be helpful for him, for addicts as well. And then we have online work groups for each of you, separately, as well. And those are just one thing. So yeah, hopefully he's, 90 meetings in 90 days at least, working with a sponsor,
Mhm,
working the steps.
mhm,
Kristin's book, Life Anonymous, I share that often, particularly with partners, because it's language of 12 steps, so that you understand. And it's just good living. It's, how most of us didn't get all of those skills, and it helps us, find a different path for living with accountability, etc. You have so much on your plate. So for you, it's, I honor that you need not to, that you need that separation. Kristin has talked about it, but we talk about it on other webinars too, like healthy boundaries. They're physical, you've separated, financial, emotional. Gosh, you've got a lot going on, and spiritual. And what do you need? It's not punishment against someone. It's for my safety. These are my needs. This isn't even my wants. These are my needs,
yeah.
and understanding what your needs are. I think it's hard to figure that out. I think it's just hard to figure it out. So journaling, talking to other betrayed partners, talking to a qualified professional. If you aren't working with a support person, please email me, Tammy, TAMI at Seeking Integrity, and let me know where you're located. And I'll do my best to give you a qualified professional in your area. Everybody I recommend, I try to make sure that they work from a pro-dependent lens. So they're, not saying you're part of the problem. Like, and I'm sorry, but, BS that, oh, if you talk to me about this, it's going to trigger me and I'm going to go relapse because what you said. No, 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 no. Nothing you did or didn't do caused this. He has choices in how he shows up, and, he can say that's triggering for me and I'm going to go talk to my sponsor so that I don't act out, but just shoving it aside
Mhm,
and going, we can never talk about this, won't be ultimately
mhm.
healthy for your relationship. But that's down the pike.
Well,
You guys have
he
a
can
lot to
do
do.
the 3 C's, and
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
can sort through the content and the context and the choices that he has,
Yeah.
despite your emotional,
Yeah.
responses. I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Yes.
go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, no. But yeah, he is responsible for him. You are responsible for you and kids and your sister. So you got enough on your plate, Debbie McRae did a really good 2-part webinar on grief. You got a lot going on, grieving. Your sister is still here, but grieving the loss of the husband you thought you had, grieving the all of this that's going on, that life isn't how you'd like it. That could be a useful one for you. Kristin's and all of the other webinars are posted on our website. You can find, just a bunch of those, but connection is really key. So your tribe, we have an old lady posse, and I'm only bringing that up. They named it, we didn't. But like, people find their tribe, they find their posse, they find their support people. We did an empowered women's retreat. We were talking before this started, and 12 women from all over the world, all walks of life, came to that. And the common denominator was they'd been betrayed and they wanted healing. They didn't want to stay stuck. And they are a tribe now. They are connected. They are communicating. They are in this for life.
Yeah.
That's how we show up, for each other and take care of ourselves as well. So,
yeah. And the difficult thing with betrayed partners, because you're saying in your write out that you feel detached, is when you are betrayed and when people show up in such a disappointing way, the last thing on earth you want to go into a group of other people for, I don't want to feel vulnerable or more exposed. I don't want to deal with more people's stuff. But unfortunately, at least from my experience of working in this field for 15 years now, that is your only way through it. Is you have to use other people, because you're saying, how do I stop blaming myself? How do I communicate with him? My answers are usually because you work with other people. Blame and shame are natural wirings that we have. Like I said, it's if as long as you're wired with a desire for people to love you and desire for people to wired to have people love you and want you in your life, you're going to have that pushing back. Oh no, this is your fault. This is how you're screwed up. This is how you're not worthy of love and belonging. So you have to practice shame resiliency. And part of that is going to tell your story, saying it out loud, speaking it out loud, kind of like you watched me do today, because it kind of withers away because you start seeing the insanity of it when you start speaking it out to other people. And when you start speaking it out to other people, you will become better at communicating it with him, because you'll start putting those 3 C's together and you'll become much more connected and eloquent with saying, this is what's going on. You did this. This is the story I'm telling myself. This is the history behind it. These are the shame things that I'm, acting out of. This is what I need. This is how I need to react. This is, what I need to see from you instead. And that's the new communication style that can come out when you do work with a group and when you work through these like 3 C's.
Yeah. When I was thinking, the story I'm telling myself, I actually use that one a lot. Kristin has shared that on previous webinars too. I use it a lot, and the story I'm telling myself when you are unable to hear me is that you're trying to blame me for, a relapse or whatever. It's like, or the story I'm telling myself when you can't show up for our family is that you don't care and you don't want a future, whatever it is. And that person can then go, yeah, that's true. Or, oh, that's not whatever. But if I say it as the story I'm telling myself, it isn't like blame, because, and it's not okay or right. But I'm telling you, with addicts, it will be defense, lie, minimize, gaslight, blame shift, everything else, because we suck, at showing up, and taking accountability for our behaviors and our emotions and actions. We don't even know what our emotions are, when we first get into recovery. Like, when you're talking about the chin down, I was like, yep, that, because yeah. And I, complete
I had no
disconnect.
body. As far as my brain was concerned, I had no body.
Yeah. And if I just think it, I can control everything.
And I can talk my way into or out of anything.
Yes. And it's all, it's all lies, so yes. And what Kristin said about joining a group, and yes, there's lots of reasons why people go, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to, or I don't want to hear all their stories. I've got enough, but it's not about hearing the details. There's hope, there's connection, there's lifelines, and all of those. I put the betrayed partner drop-in groups, like there's lifelines, and and there are people that are stuck, and it's okay to take what you need and leave the rest. We say that about 12-step as well. I also we have online work groups. So the betrayed partner will start again in April. Angela Spearman, who was one of the facilitators for the retreat, facilitates that. And you'll have, a communication tools. You'll work on healthy boundaries. You'll have some components that could be useful. So though, Kristin's, ours, there's lots of resources. Like, find what resonates for you, in this journey, but please don't try to, you can't do this alone. Oh, I know the other thing you said, through this, and that's the operative word. This doesn't get in your past. You get through this, and but this is a lifelong journey, and unfortunately you can't truncate it and go, yep, done with that. You're going to throw it in the closet, and now I don't have to ever deal with that again. So, okay, next question. Wife of a PA here, 17 years together, 6 months from most recent discovery. Oh, can you speak on body dysmorphic disorder affecting betrayed partners, specifically of PAs, with the infinite comparisons that they put us up against?
Right. So this is a perfect example of a trauma and shame history feeding the body dysmorphia. So just for those of you that don't know, body dysmorphia is like, you see the reality of my body, but when I look in the mirror, I have a distorted view. So maybe if you're just a typical healthy weight or size, you think that you're fat, or there's features, or your nose is too big, or something's going on. But what this person is saying is that the problem with pornography is that there's so much choreography and lighting and editing done to just highlight these super stimulating, super perfected features, that people don't get a reality check of what real bodies look like, what real sex might look like. It's not as choreographed and with the angles and the camera, etc. And so betrayed partners can experience this, like, I can't compete with this kind of super stimulant, is what we've called it. I can't constantly be at the right angle and have my body be perfected in a certain way to give that same experience. It's just not reality. But what is also driven behind that, right? If we go, the content of the problem is that you feel like there's comparisons going on, and you just feel overwhelmed because you can't compare. And then it cuts at the future of your sexual experience, how you feel like the world views you, your ability to repair with your partner. But let's go into the context. There's actual history, traumatic history there. You've seen your partner leave your relationship multiple times to go view pornography instead of leaning into you and your relationship. You've probably, if you're saying you have an infinite comparison to be put up against, I have this yucky feeling inside me that he has said things to you that are now seared into your brain, of the ways that you're not living up, or the ways that you're imperfect. And I'm sorry, because like we were talking about, this stuff gets seared into your brain permanently, and you wish you could shake it, but all you hear is, you must not love me because of all these things that you said to me. I must not be attractive to you because this history of what you've said and done to me. And then obviously that will also contribute to the shame stories of, these are all the ways that I am not enough. These are all the ways that I am contributing to falling short in this marriage. These horrible, self-critical, self-focused stories that, if only I weighed this much, or my body looked this way, or I did this during sex, or I didn't do this during sex, then I would be lovable and I could fix my partner's pornography addiction issue. And this wouldn't be an issue anymore, as we take that blame, right? Because again, your brain doesn't like uncertainty. It doesn't like this idea that your partner can go out and do these deceiving, hurtful, betraying things that you never signed up for and that you never knew were this bad. And it doesn't like that, because that's just uncertain and scary. And how do I fix that? So instead, your brain goes, oh, I know how to fix this. I'm going to put an obsessive focus on you, on the way that you need to fix yourself to solve your partner's problem. And I think I'm going to save you by giving you that obsessive storyline. That's the shame story. So just really explore. Hopefully, you have a professional who can help you explore the trauma, the betrayal trauma that has happened because of your partner's lying, sneaking around, the mean things he's said, what you've seen, what you've experienced, and the dark self-critical shame stories that cause you to just not want to connect with anybody, that make you constantly feel less than, that makes you want to pull away from the world, from other people, from humans, because this is so painful. And Tammy, what do you want to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking, porn, sex fiction too, but porn is, intense. It's 1,000 images in a minute, and it's not reality. Just like Krista was saying, there's nothing, real about it. And there's nothing intimate about it. It's not real connection. So it's intensity rather than intimacy, but it's numbing out, it's escaping, porn never disappoints. I don't have to have conversations. It's all of those things. So it's very contained, but it ultimately is an intimacy disorder, and it's a disconnect, for people. So yes, understanding that, we've had people that have gone out and had, massive, plastic surgery trying to create an image. And, at the end of the day, they were like, that wasn't it. And it isn't, the guys that come to treatment, or even Scott has on the work groups, he asks them, is your affair partner, let's go with, is prettier, funnier, smarter? No, it's not that. It's the disconnect is, I'm just going over here, I'm looking at these images, and it's got nothing to do, unfortunately, it's not personal to you. It just feels like it is. But understanding that we are good in our bodies just as they are, and it's the problem is the addicts. And it doesn't have to be, I was thinking about what you said. It was like challenge to the distortion. This is a massive, distortion. So, okay. Last question real quick. My husband was with women half his age, escort bikini models, short, tall, thin, brown, hair, blonde, fly in escorts. I told him, no compete. I'm never having sex with you, period, accept it or not. I can't see that changing for me. So yeah, well, and that sounds like your physical boundary. So
Yeah, I mean, look, you have every right to set whatever boundary that helps you feel safe. Um, Although I can't help but wonder, the little devil's advocate in me is that you're here trying to learn and grow and shift and move. And so sounds like there's a part of you that's still like, okay, is there any possible way that my husband and I could repair these deep, deep betrayals, and I could get into a place and space where I could ever potentially feel vulnerable and willing to be intimate with him or anyone ever again? Because it can be a lonely life to decide to kind of permanently physically cut yourself off, not just from your partner, but from the world, from your pain and trauma. And again, those are understandable responses. But I wonder if there's a part of you that's like, okay, but what if that's not going to be enough for me? What if I feel like I might need more? So, acknowledge the part that says, I can't ever see this changing. I can't ever see myself feeling comfortable with this person ever again. That part is valid. I hear you. I understand you. And you can't see yourself ever changing from that. But I wonder if you're here in these groups, there's a part of you that wonders if there's something more, if there's a different way, if there's something out there that he can do to change your heart, your body, something you can do to change your heart and your body. So I just continue to encourage you to be curious and keep asking these questions and talk it out. You're doing the right thing.
glad you're here. And Kristen, thank you for another great. I mean, I really do so appreciate the content that you bring and you showing up and sharing with all of us. I seriously do. The story I'm telling myself, or when I'm going into a shame thing, I go, my friend Kristen would, so it's meaningful. You have impacted my life in a positive way, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you
Thank you,
next week.
everyone.
Eddie
Thanks for
Caparucci
having
will be
me.
joining us. Bye-bye.